Hi everyone, this is Tom, and in this video I want to go through a strategy you can use to cram for exams. So let's say you've left it right until the last minute. Maybe you spent all your semester watching YouTube videos about how to study and never actually got round to studying. Or maybe you spend the whole semester making notes and now you realize that making notes didn't help you learn and you have to try and cram everything into your brain last minute. So you may have a week or two before your exams. If it's more than a week or two, if it's say 3, 4, 5 weeks, you probably have enough time to have a better strategy, in which case I would recommend going to watch my video on the full exam prep strategy, as this will be much more effective than cramming last minute. Cramming is not the ideal situation, but you can make the best out of this less than ideal situation. And that's what this video is all about. So let's start by looking at the strategy. The first thing to mention is that if you have left it to a week or two before the exam, you have limited time. So what does this mean, having limited time? Well, this means you need to maximize every minute. At this point, you can't spend time doing things that are less than perfect in terms of getting you to retain information. At this point, every minute counts and you need to maximize how you use that time. Don't waste time. Particularly don't waste time creating stuff. And what do I mean by this? Well, people kind of take a textbook, take a lecture slides, take any kind of sort of notes, and just copy that to another page, or copy that and create flashcards, copy that and create something else. By creating something new, what you're doing is saying, okay, I'm going to create this new resource that me later on is going to use to learn. Well, you later on has to be now, because it is crunch time. You're about to sit your exams. So you need to, rather than trying to create some new thing that future you is going to use, you need to be using something right now to learn. So don't try and create some new set of notes that you're going to use in the future. The future is now. This is the time to learn. Other thing is you have to be strategic. You don't have enough time to cover everything multiple times, understanding everything. You're going to have to be strategic about the key things that you need to retain and the skills that you need to develop to pass that exam, to do as well as possible in that exam. This means focusing on weak areas. So if you're really strong in a certain area, and let's say you're doing medical exams and you're really good at cardiology, but you have no idea what you're doing when it comes to neurology or renal, and your exam is going to cover everything, you're going to get the most bang for your buck in terms of how much time you put in by focusing on the weak areas. Because if a cardiology question comes up, even if you don't know the answer for sure, you're going to be able to have a good guess at that. But if a renal question comes up, you're going to have no idea, and you're going to score zero on that question. But if you do even just a little bit of renal revision, you're going to have a better chance of kind of guessing or stumbling towards the right answer. So focusing on your weaknesses helps to bring your score up much more than focusing on your strengths. Also, the thing you want to do is focus on what is most likely to come up. So your exams could be, say, OSCEs for medical school finals. But the thing is, there are things in your OSCEs that are going to be 70, 80% likely to come up, and other things that are like 5, 10% likely to come up. So if you focus on the things that are most likely to come up in your exams, you're going to score much better. If it's an essay exam, they tend to set more or less the same essays year on year, but your the course content could cover a lot more stuff than what comes up on the essays each year. So if you figure out what's most likely to come up on that essay and target your revision to those potential essays that are most likely to come up, that's going to give you the best shot at passing those exams. And the other thing is you need to practice what will come up. So if let's say you're doing an MCQ exam, you want to spend as much time practicing multiple choice questions as possible. If it's a short answer question exam, practice doing short answer questions. Get good at that skill. And you need to have, obviously, some kind of mark sheet that you can use to assess how well you answered those questions in the exam format. You want to practice that skill and get feedback on how well you do and tweak that. Another one is essays. So I'll give you an example. When I did my AS level history exam, I didn't know much history. My content knowledge wasn't that good. But what I did was practice over and over doing history essays in a timed format from memory, just like the exam. And I was a bit cheeky. I took my practice essays to my teacher, sort of between lessons, found her in her office, took it to her, and she gave me immediate feedback on those essays, including what I could do better, what I needed to improve. Then I'd go away, practice another essay, bring it back to her and say, what can I improve on this? I'd go away, practice another essay. And I did this over and over again and actually ended up scoring 100% on the essay exam after doing that strategy. And I didn't know much history. I just got really good at writing essays in the format of that exam with the specific facts that I knew I needed to know for that exam. And so if you can implement that, you'll do much better. Or it could be, say, maths or, say, engineering problems. So if you've got a maths exam and you know they're going to give you problems that require a certain set of skills, just practice those problems over and over again, and that will really help you get through those exams. Okay, on to the next topic, which is to focus on high yield content. So if you're in A levels or GCSEs, quite often there's the content is limited so that you can actually get through everything before your exam. But if you're doing something like medicine or a university course, psychology, or any kind of university course, there'll be so much content that you can't cover it in a week or two. So you have to focus on the key stuff. And this is where something called the Pareto principle comes into play. And this Pareto principle basically says that 20% of the inputs account for 80% of the outputs. So let's just draw this quickly. So this is 20% of what you can learn. So this is like if you were to take the entire syllabus, the entire amount of content that you could learn in preparation for this exam, in green here, accounts for 80% of what comes up on the exam. So if you were to learn the key high yield 20% of content that always comes up on the exam, you're going to do really well on the exam. If you spend your time learning all the kind of supplementary, less likely to come up, waffly kind of corner content that doesn't really tend to come up on exams, the maximum you can score is this 20%. So 80% of what you can learn is this stuff that doesn't come up on the exams. So what you want to do is focus on this 20%, because that accounts for 80% of the exam. Now, a challenge, obviously, is how do you figure out what is this high yield content? How do you figure out the stuff that always tends to come up on the exams? Well, the first thing is check past exams. So check through what has come up on the exams year after year after year. This is really an important thing to do. Sometimes it's not possible. Sometimes the university, for example, doesn't give you access to past exam papers. The great thing when I did my A-levels for all my A-levels, actually, biology, chemistry, maths, and history, you could go on the internet and download past papers for the last 10 years or something. So what I did was I downloaded all the past papers, organized the questions on those past papers into topics, and then did the testing sandwich technique using the past papers as my practice exam at the final part of the testing sandwich. And the testing sandwich is in loads of my other videos. I recommend heading over and watching those videos. I've got a video dedicated to the testing sandwich. And so I practiced these exam papers over and over again. And then what happened was on the exams, the same questions came up, and I answered them how I knew the examiner's mark sheet wanted me to answer them, and scored 100% on those exams. So I need to make a video all about how to smash your A-level exams. But this is what I did for my A-levels and biology, chemistry, and so on. And was able to really, really smash those exams. So really check the past papers and focus on the stuff that comes up again and again in the past papers. When you're heading into the exam, you want to feel like if the paper from last year or 5 years ago comes up again, you're going to know all the answers. The next thing to do is check the syllabus. So often what will happen is the university or your A-level examining board or whoever's setting the exam will give a syllabus. Sometimes they won't give a syllabus, in which case, obviously, don't check the syllabus. It doesn't exist. But often they'll give you a syllabus. So you want to have a look at that syllabus, and often it's not that helpful. It'll be a kind of vague list. What you can do is ask AI, you put that vague list into AI, and you ask AI to organize it into topics and subtopics. And the AI models, for example, Grok or ChatGPT, are really good at this. And you can actually ask it, what topics do I need to cover for this exam as a A-level student, or as a final year medical student, or as a whatever kind of student. And then it'll break it down for you and save you having to do that hard work. And then at this point, when you've got the syllabus in front of you, glance through and highlight weaknesses or gaps. So this is important just to pick out those things that are really odd, that you hadn't even thought you needed to study. So this is how you identify your unknown unknowns. So there's some things that you don't know, and you need to study it. And there's some things that you don't even realize could come up on the exam, and you need to study them. And hopefully the syllabus gives you that. I'll give you an example of this. I didn't check the syllabus when I was sitting my Diploma in Child Health OSCE exam. So this is a practical exam. You go in, you examine kids, you talk to parents, you do kind of these real life simulated scenarios, and you have an examiner who sits there and goes through and checks everything. And one of the stations was you had to interpret an audiogram. And at this point, I'd done several university extra placements in pediatrics. I was really interested in pediatrics. I'd done something like 12 months of pediatric jobs working as a pediatric doctor. I'd done pediatrics in general practice. So I'd done loads and loads and loads of pediatrics, never come across an audiogram. This is not something that a GP is going to be interpreting. Very unusual for a hospital pediatric doctor to interpret an audiogram. This is very much a specialist thing that they would do in audiology clinic or ear, nose and throat clinic. And so I didn't even know that I needed to know this thing. And so one of the stations was on that. I went in and had no idea. It said, interpret this audiogram. I had no idea what I was looking at. And I completely failed that station. I passed every other station really comfortably, did really well in every other aspect of the exam, except this one station, and that caused me to fail. And so that was so frustrating. And then I looked, and it was in the syllabus, there was one tiny little detail in the syllabus that said, interpret an audiogram. And it wasn't included in any other of the exam material, nowhere else except from this one little detail in the syllabus. So I wish I'd checked the syllabus, because if I'd seen that line, I could have done 5 minutes of studying, figured out what an audiogram was, passed that station very easily, and smashed the exam. So that's why this is a bit of a warning. That's an important lesson that I learned from that exam. So next step is to find your weak area or areas. So yeah, sorry about my handwriting here. In fact, it's so bad I'm going to redo it. Find your weakest areas. So when you have limited time for your exam, so you've got a week or two before your exam's coming up, you really want to focus on your weaknesses, because if you bring your weaknesses up just a tiny bit, that's going to have a much bigger impact than if you focus on your strengths. So there's a thing called the learning curve. So what happens is, this is kind of effort or time. And this is kind of how much you know. And what happens is, when you first start out, you know very little. And then you put in a bit of effort and time, and you have this rapid increase in how much you know. And then it starts to plateau. So if you're really strong on one topic, chances are you're here on the plateau phase. So let's say you're studying medicine, you're really good at cardiology. You could be here on cardiology. So if you put another 6 hours of effort into cardiology, you're only going to get this much benefit. So it's not worth it. But if you're really weak on, say, endocrine, so let's say this is a weak area, and you put in just a little bit of effort, you can get all the way up to here. So you really want to, so that tiny bit of effort gives you this much in terms of benefit towards knowledge and what you can do in your exam. So focus on the weaknesses. How do you do this? Well, firstly, sit a mock exam. So let's say you're doing medicine, you've got a question bank. You can go through, say, 100 questions on that topic. On all the topics that could come up on your exam. So you cover everything in this practice mock exam, covering 100 questions, and then get feedback that tells you each topic how you did. So you could do 100 questions across 10 topics. There'll be some topics where you score 80%, other topics where you score 20%. You need to focus then on the weakest areas. So you identify weak areas or topics, and then you focus on weak topics. So find your very, very worst topic and then make sure you're spending most of your time revising that topic. So start with that topic, get yourself up to a bit better score on that topic, then move on to the next weakest topic, and you're going to pretty much ignore the strong topics at this point. You really want to focus on the weaknesses. So you're benefiting from this rapid increase in knowledge phase. So your top priorities are your weaknesses. Okay, next one is when you're actually studying, what should you do? You should focus on testing to increase your recall. So you're focusing on practicing recalling that information, ideally as close to your exam kind of setting as possible. So you're testing yourself and aiming to practice recalling content. You're not passively reading and absorbing things. You're not passively watching videos. You're not doing anything where you're kind of passively absorbing. You're spending as much time as possible testing yourself and recalling the information. So you can do various ways of rapid testing. And I really recommend starting with a ready-made resource for this. So if you're doing medicine, a perfect resource is the Zero to Finals member site. Just sign up to the member site, and then you can use multiple choice questions, short answer questions, extended matching questions, digital flashcards, and a fact trainer tool exactly designed for rapid testing your knowledge. So what options and so if you're not studying medicine, you're studying something else, you'll be able to find some kind of question bank, practice scores, Anki decks, flashcards. You'll be able to find this stuff online. Almost certainly someone somewhere has created this resource that you can start using straight away. It may be that your university already has something like this for you. It could be that people in the year above have created Anki stuff, multiple choice questions based on your exact exam. Somebody will have created the resources that you need to do this. Don't spend your time creating it. You don't have that time. You need to find it somewhere else and just start practicing. So your options are, for example, question banks, flashcards, Anki, and if you're doing medicine, use the fact trainer tool on the Zero to Finals members site. There's a link in the description, but it's designed exactly for this purpose, and it does spaced repetitions of all the key facts you need for your exams. And you've got sort of practice essays and practice problems. Let's say if you're doing a maths exam, just practice solving problems the same way you'd be doing in your exam with feedback. Just do that over and over and over again, testing yourself, especially on the weak stuff. And then occasionally add read and recall. And I've got a full video on read and recall and how to use this for specific things. So for specific weak areas. So let's say you're going through cardiology questions and you identify that you just don't really know when you're supposed to prescribe what medication for high blood pressure in what kind of scenarios. And just doing rapid testing is not going to teach you that, because there's very specific rules that you need to know. And if you're just answering a specific fact, say there's a 40-year-old person who comes in and they need it, and you give them an ACE inhibitor, you don't know what the cutoff, when would you actually give a calcium channel blocker, when would you actually give something else? So you need to actually go and read and understand that topic. And that's when you identify something like that, that's when you take 5-10 minutes, go away and properly read and recall that or even create a mind map and watch my video on how to do mind maps, because it's not passively copying across. It's always about recalling. The more you can recall stuff, the more you'll remember it for your exams. And then the final thing is 24 hours before the exam. So if you're watching this video 24 hours before your exam, you've left it quite late and you're hoping that you can learn the whole syllabus in the 24 hours before your exam. Realistically, that's not possible. The best thing you can do right now, 24 hours before your exam, is to rest. Why? Well, your exam performance, the performance that you do in your exam, whether you've been studying the whole semester, cramming the last 2 weeks, or you've not done any work at all the whole semester, your performance is basically proportional to your mental acuity in the exam. So let's say you were to pull an all-nighter and do nothing, down loads of coffee, Red Bull, energy drinks, loads of snacks, pull an all-nighter and try and learn the entire syllabus in that 12 hours overnight, and you have an exam the next day. You might get some stuff to stick in your brain, but when you're sat in your exam, your brain's going to be foggy. You're not going to be able to think straight. Your heart rate's going to be up because you're tired. Everything's going to hurt in your body. You're not going to be able to concentrate. You're going to be easily distracted. All those things are going to bring your exam score down. So what you need to do 24 hours before your exam, more importantly than anything else, is chill. Just rest, have a relaxing time, watch a movie, chill with friends, try and release some positive endorphins, do some light exercise, nothing too strenuous that wears you out. Just do fun stuff that's enjoyable, that you feel good about, that relaxes you. Get a really good night's sleep. Rest in those 24 hours before your exams. And then in the, say, hour or so before your exam, you can start thinking through some things, get your brain warmed up, listen to some music, talk to people lightly about what can come up on the exam, and then have your optimal performance. So you want your clarity, mental acuity, everything to be on point in that exam so you can do the best with what you have available to you. So that's the end of the video. I hope that video was helpful. If you want a nice version of these notes to download, you can download them on the Zero to Finals Patreon. There's a link in the description. And I'll see you in the next video, which will be tomorrow.